Hello. I'm going to be starting now that it is 6 o'clock. Welcome. Thank you for being here. For reimagining Pennsylvania Natural, how we use methane gas, what it's doing to us, and the path to a gas-free future. This is sort of a 101 and a 201 in one on gas. My name is Linnea Bond. I've been the health educator and campaign coordinator on building electrification for a year. And by building electrification, I mean trying to move us in PA from fossil fuels to electricity and also electrifying buildings, which is part of that since nationally about 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. My background is in theater and sociology. So I'm really excited to do this presentation because my background is not in science, but I've built this knowledge first as a concerned citizen and now working as an activist with PSRPA, and I'm excited to share what I've learned with you. So right now in the chat, please write something that you know about gas. I hope we have the chat. I think we do. And make sure you write I know if it's something you know about gas or something I know is, and or write something that you want to know. But remember, if you're writing something that you want to know, to write I want to know about or I'm curious about. So you can write in the chat something you know about gas and something that you want to know about. I'm going to save the chat, but also just know if you write in the chat during the presentation, besides when I ask a question, great question, I won't be able to see it because I can't do two things at once. And also we'll do a question and answer at the end because I can't present and see questions at the same time. So do me a favor, and if you have a question, you can open some kind of window and type in any question you have as you go. And then at the end, when we open it up for Q&A, you can post it because then I'll be able to see it. I want to make sure that I can address what people ask. Yes, fracked gas is not a clean bridge fuel. Love that. Obviously, I already made the presentation. So if you write in something that you want to know, we can talk about it when we do question and answer. Methane is 78 times. Oh, we'll get to that. It's actually 86 times worse in the near term than CO2 over a 20-year time frame. Great. Methane is the worst greenhouse gas. Yeah. Okay. We already have a starting point, which is great. You know that levels of atmospheric methane have risen drastically in the past 10 years. This is true, and I'll talk about why. This is a great start. Okay. Next slide, please. Over the next hour, we'll cover natural gas basics, fracking in PA, methane emissions and global warming, gas in the home, utilities, and the gas transition, liquefied natural gas threatening PA, what you can do, and then we'll have a question and answer. This is a lot. I personally have a pretty difficult time doing this work. So if you are overwhelmed at any moment, just take a breath and we'll hop back in. We got some more answers. The 16-inch gas pipeline installation in my backyard blew out. Oh my goodness. Explosions. The drilling mud is still in my creek. Oh my goodness. I want to know how we can get off fracking in PA when state legislators forbidden localities from taking the initiative to ban new gas hookups. Not quite, but kind of. We'll talk about preemption at the end. Okay, so next slide. What is so-called natural gas? Next slide. Natural gas is a fossil fuel, which means it was created over millions of years through compression of organic material underground. So it's made up of mostly methane. So many people call it methane gas instead of natural gas. Lisa, you're right on it. Because as far as I understand, natural gas was a term created by the natural gas or methane gas industry. So consumers associate gas with nature. It does come from nature, but its use is destroying nature because it is, as someone pointed out, 80 to 86 times as efficient at trapping heat as carbon dioxide over the first 20 years after it enters the atmosphere. Like carbon, methane absorbs sunlight and solar radiation that have bounced off the Earth's surface. Normally, this radiation would escape into space, but these pollutants, which can last for years to centuries in the atmosphere, trap the heat and cause the planet to get hotter. Methane gas accounts for about 30% of the energy used in the United States. Of that 30%, about 40% of natural gas goes to electric power production, and the remainder is split between residential and commercial uses, such as heating and cooking and industrial uses. It's burned to produce heat. The byproduct is carbon dioxide. It's used for energy and to produce chemicals, fertilizer, and hydrogen. In the chat, I'm curious, right? If you think that 40% of methane going to electric production is higher or lower than you thought. Next slide. In order to get methane gas, we have to draw it out of the ground through fracking. The picture on the right shows the fracking process, in which large amounts of water, sand, and chemicals are injected deep underground at high pressure to fracture shale deposits and sand and coal beds to release trapped gas. These shale deposits are shown in the map on the left. A large part of what extractors call the Marcellus Shale deposit is in Pennsylvania, which makes sense because the Appalachian Mountains are very old. They used to be on par with Everest in height, but have eroded. So people say they're not very tall, and that's because they used to be extremely tall, but they're extremely old. And during that time, the natural gas was created under Appalachia. Next slide, please. This is a map of the methane gas infrastructure across the US, including pipelines and compressor stations. As you see, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and Ohio are big hubs. Next slide, which means that as we build natural gas infrastructure, our state goes from looking like this. Next slide. To this. Well, technically the top right is Wyoming. But pictured, we have some processing, some flaring to burn off byproducts that aren't wanted. We have extraction with a drill rig. And like I said, the upper right is interconnected drill sites in Wyoming. Next slide. Why is fracking so bad, besides scarring the landscape and looking terrible? Fracking contaminates ground and surface water, causes air pollution, noise, and light pollution, releases radiation, damages the ecosystem, and can cause earthquakes. In the last 15 years, like you said, it's extremely exploded over the last 10 years. In the last 15 years, fracking has exploded, pun intended, and now over 15 million Americans live in close proximity to this heavy industry. And actually, we're doing a series on people who are impacted by different kinds of heavy industries. And Edith Abeta here spoke with me about how her community has pushed back on natural gas drilling. Naturally occurring radioactive elements like radium are drawn out of the rocks during fracking. And radioactive material primarily comes back as a component of brine, a byproduct of the extraction process. The brine is then hauled to treatment plants or injection wells where it's disposed of by being shot back into the ground. Exposure to radioactivity can lead to nausea, headaches, skin irritation, fatigue, and cancer. If radiation is ingested or if it enters your body through a cut, it can act like a tiny X-ray implanted in your body that causes cancer over time. Exposure to air pollution caused from fracking activity can lead to headaches, coughing, nausea, nosebleeds, skin and eye irritation, dizziness, and shortness of breath. Pregnant women living in close proximity to fracking sites and low birth weights and can cause low birth weights and heart defects. Pregnant women living within about a 3-mile distance of fracking operations that regularly engaged in flaring, according to one study, were 50% more likely to have preterm birth than those without exposure. VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and other chemicals emitted from fracking can cause respiratory effects like shortness of breath, reduced lung function, aggravated asthma, and chronic respiratory disease symptoms. Fracked sand or silica released during the drilling process, which is extremely small in diameter, can be easily inhaled, which can lead to shortness of breath, chest pain, respiratory failure, and lung cancer. And harmful chemicals and heavy metals like mercury and lead have contaminated agricultural areas near fracking operations. Exposure can occur from eating produce grown on contaminated soil or by consuming animals that consumed contaminated feed. These contaminants can also alter the pH and nutrient availability of the soil, resulting in decreased crop production and economic losses. Children are also at high risk of exposure to contaminated soil due to their frequent hand-to-mouth behavior, because kids are dirty. No, they're lovely. Last, the practice of frac sand mining can make land reclamation nearly impossible, leaving irreparable damage to the landscape. And diesel pollution and noise pollution from fracking can be constant as truck traffic is intense and fracking continues 24/7. So fracking is terrible for the communities in which it happens. Next slide. More than 300,000 miles of interstate and intrastate transmission pipelines, 2.1 million miles of local distribution lines, and more than 1,000 compressor stations bring natural gas to the market. So although some problems particularly impact communities that fracking occurs in, and studies have found that fracking disproportionately occurs in Black and Brown communities, affecting their health disproportionately, there's a whole system of production, transmission, and distribution that we need to worry about. In particular, the existential problem that affects us all, i.e. global warming. Next slide. Scientists have found that as much as 2.3% of total gas production worldwide, compared with estimates of 1.4, could be leaking into the air of methane. So again, that's of all of the methane that's being moved, 2.3% of total gas could be leaking. The higher estimates stem from a number of so-called super emitters. An airplane survey of 1,000 industry sites found that 4% had unusually high emissions, which are thought to be caused by malfunctions. So the leaks are rare enough that they can be easily missed in surveys. But in the United States, such leaks have nearly doubled the climate impact of natural gas, causing warming on par with carbon dioxide. Let me underscore that again. In the words of Irina Gorsky, that are here, quote, if fugitive emissions of methane from the equipment used to transport and store natural gas exceed more than 3%, natural gas would have a greater climate change impact than coal. She also said that there's evidence to suggest the industry's methane emissions well exceed that 3%. Ergo, when natural gas industry spokespeople tell us, I'm an environmentalist, which literally every gas executive and proponent in every hearing I have gone to over the last 6 months has said, which is clearly a brilliant bit of coaching for some PR firm that is uniting all these gas companies. Or they say, look at this graph of declining CO2 emissions, like Linnea pulled from a recent natural gas presentation given in Pennsylvania. We can respond that this graph of carbon emissions carbon dioxide emissions, CO2, is not a representative graph, and that methane emissions are on par with coal, causing the 1.1 degree of global warming from pre-industrial levels. Again, estimates are that methane has caused as much global warming as coal. As a reminder, the International Panel on Climate Change says we need to stay below 1.5 degrees to avoid the most extreme impacts of climate change, and that number is looking increasingly unlikely. Next slide. So let's talk about gas in our home, in your home, in my home, how we're responsible for contributing to this horrifying reality. Next slide. According to the Energy Information Administration, of 123 million homes, 61% uses methane for something, methane gas for something. 49% use it for water heating, 38% use it for cooking, and 52% use it for space heating, 4% use it for outdoor grilling. Feel free to write in the chat if any of those numbers surprise you. For me personally, cooking was less than I thought. I think it's interesting that gas executives have used it as a cultural rallying point to say, oh, don't take away our gas, when actually only 38% of people use gas for cooking. Next slide, please. Many of us have heard about the harms of natural gas stoves. And the RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute study that examined the decades of research finding that 12.5% of childhood asthma can be attributed to gas-powered stoves. That's because indoor levels of pollutants may be 2 to 5 and occasionally more than 100 times higher than outdoor air pollution levels. That includes nitrogen dioxide, which causes lung damage. Homes with gas stoves have nitrogen dioxide concentrations 50 to 400 times, 400%, higher than homes with electric stoves, including carbon monoxide, which displaces oxygen in the blood and so deprives vital organs of oxygen, including benzene, a carcinogen for which there is no safe level of exposure. It particularly is a cause of leukemia and other blood cancers, and including particulate matter. When we breathe particulate matter, it is deposited deep into the lungs, making it one of the most damaging indoor air pollutants. Cooking with gas creates nearly twice as much particulate matter in the home as cooking with an electric stove. Oh, we'll get there, Elizabeth. Well, to some extent. I want to talk more about that than I have time for. So you may be thinking, what can I do? Oh my goodness, next slide. You can replace your stove with an induction stove. You can replace your gas heaters with heat pump water heaters and space heaters. You can power your home with rooftop solar. If you're a renter like I am, who has a gas stove and no vents, you can get a portable stove, induction stove, and open your windows when you cook. If you have them, you can use stove vents in combination with using the back burner. You can change your electric energy provider to the energy co-op. If you want to use an all Pennsylvania option, they also have community solar and wind. You can seek to reduce your energy use. I always try to challenge myself, make sure I'm putting on as thermals instead of turning up the heat, space heat, and weatherize your home. I live with 4 roommates and we've had conversations about that. You can get an electric vehicle, or even better, you can bike and public transit. You can fund through the IRA, the I was like induction IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. Please write in the chat if you have or will take any of these measures. And yes, I realize that we'll talk about the challenge, the financial challenge a little bit. And also, like I said, some people like me are renters and don't have control as much over their housing. Next slide. Unfortunately, even if you stop using gas, we as a society are in it. Your next door neighbor might be a chocolate factory in West Reading that explodes in March, killing 7 people, injuring 11, and forcing several families to relocate. Gas is a problem. How do we move away from it individually and also as a society? Next slide. Okay, so there's the good news and the bad news. Bad news. This is a great cartoon. I have good news and bad news. The good news is you're not a hypochondriac. The bad news, every single thing that burns fossil fuels has to be replaced with a clean energy alternative before 2050. That means millions of cars and trucks, millions of gas furnaces and water heaters, and thousands of coal and power plants. And how do we go about doing that in a just way? The good news, all of the devices that need to be replaced will have needed to be replaced in the next 30 years anyway. Wind and solar are now the cheapest cost of generating energy. Electric appliances are extremely efficient. LED is, for example, 10 times as energy efficient as incandescent. And electricity gets cleaner every year. And the IRA gives massive tax rebates for electrification, especially for low-income people. We have to electrify everything with clean, renewable energy, and we have to use way less than we're using now, period. But when we get off of fossil fuels, we'll have clean air and up to 40% more clean water. There are things we can do in our own homes, and there's work being done to make these changes accessible. It's not complete, it's not what it needs to be, but we are on track. But next slide, let's talk about utilities. Everyone take a breath. This stuff isn't easy, but if we don't know it, then nothing will change. So let's plow ahead. Next slide. Our gas utilities must transition to providing something other than gas or die. I'll draw your attention to the green and blue states in the graphs. In 2019, Berkeley, California became the first city in the country to ban natural gas in new buildings. Not soon after, a number of the largest US cities, Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, D.C., each adopted rules that would either ban or limit the use of natural gas in new residential and commercial buildings. More than 50 California towns, cities, and countries have passed gas bans or electrification codes since 2019. New York is the first state in the country to ban natural gas and other fossil fuels in most new buildings, approved in the new $229 billion state budget containing the provision, I believe a week ago, but I could be wrong about that. The law bans gas-powered stoves, furnaces, and propane heating, and effectively encourages the use of climate-friendly appliances such as heat pumps and induction stoves in most new residential buildings across the state. It requires all electric heating and cooking in new buildings shorter than 7 stories by 2026, and for taller buildings by 2029. There are exceptions for large commercial and industrial buildings like stores, hospitals, laundromats, and restaurants, for example. But what does the gas industry refrain? Quote, any push to ban natural gas would raise costs to customers, jeopardize environmental progress, and deny affordable energy to underserved populations, end quote. American Gas Association President and CEO Karen Harbert in a statement. So we have Washington State's new rules requiring new buildings to be equipped with heat pumps instead of fossil fuel burning furnaces being challenged by a coalition that includes several building industry groups who filed a lawsuit alleging that the state building code council overstepped its authority when approving the new energy efficiency rules. The lawsuit says such a sweeping policy shift should not have been approved by the state legislator, should have been approved by the state legislator rather than the unelected building code council. That happened in March. So on the one hand, we have bans, and on the other hand, we have gas bans or preemption bills. As of June last year, states that outlaw gas bans account for 31% of US residential or commercial gas use. So look at the yellow and orange and pink in the graphs. I know what you're thinking. Has there been an attempt in Pennsylvania? Why, yes, there have. Not one, but 2. Last year, SB 275 was passed, but was vetoed. There's a preemption bill in Pennsylvania trying to ban gas bans. And then its twin this year, SB 143, passed the Senate and went to the House committee, where it hopefully will not move because the chair of the committee it's in is not supportive, nor is Democratic Party leadership. A Shapiro staffer has also said that if it passed, he would veto it, but we still have to watch and call when we're asked to make sure it doesn't end up in a budget provision, because that budget provision that worked for New York can happen both ways. So it could be that they pass it the other direction. Yeah, I know. Thank you for coming. This is where we learn. I can pass off all the things that I know. Scoring this brain. But why is this such a struggle? Why don't utilities want to transition to clean energy? Well, most utilities are owned by investors. Investor-owned utilities supply power to most of the country. They vary in size, structure, and the services they provide, but they are all for-profit companies, and they have a responsibility to their investors, and transitioning is expensive. So this fiduciary duty alone makes utility business models incompatible with climate goals. I think Like, are we on the same slide? Can you go to the next slide? Like losing my place. All right. So PGW is a unique case because it's owned by the city of Philadelphia. And the city has committed to net zero by 2050. So whereas other gas utilities cannot listen to those kind of resolutions, our Philadelphia's gas company might have to. Currently, they're not legally required, but there's a long conversation happening about it. An independent analysis by the nonprofit HEAT finds that Philadelphia Gas Works is projected to spend up to $8 billion over the next 35 years on new gas mains and service lines, even as the city aims to achieve carbon neutrality in nearly the same time frame. So the Office for Sustainability in Philadelphia hired analysts to study how to diversify, how to move away from fossil fuels since we've made this resolution, and their answer, their paper, the diversification study, included transitioning to hydrogen, weatherization, and transitioning to networked geothermal. Hydrogen is a terrible idea for a utility that's providing heat energy because we need the small amount of hydrogen that is available, that is made from renewable energy, reserved for hard to decarbonize industries like agriculture and industrial purposes. We don't want to be creating hydrogen through natural gas production and locking ourselves further into natural gas. Also, weatherization, one of their other suggestions, needs to be combined with any renewable transition. But PGW has committed to doing a networked geothermal pilot project. Next, no, yes, the picture is in the lower corner. So, so you have heat pumps on that left side. That is how a heat pump works. It draws energy from either air, but in terms of network geothermal, we're drawing it from the ground to heat and cool the home. So a networked geothermal is an innovative solution using, instead of natural gas, networked geothermal uses interconnected ground source heat pumps. That means pipes running from under the street to buildings and homes are filled with water, not gas, i.e. no explosion risk. The system connects buildings with different heating needs, so energy is never wasted, but it's exchanged or stored in the ground until it's needed. So for example, if you have a bunch of computers in a room, the power room of a company that uses computers, that room is going to be very hot. So that that room typically needs to be cooled to keep those computers running. So that energy would be moved and used elsewhere, depending on the season, or that heat would be moved. Where am I? So Colorado Mesa University, or college, sorry, successfully transitioned their heating and cooling system to network ground source heat pumps. HEAT said that network geothermal can, quote, transform gas utilities away from gas, all while preserving jobs, meeting emissions targets, and bringing affordable energy to our homes and buildings without greenhouse gases. Barbara, I totally agree with you. We need real zero. I'm quoting the resolution, by the way, when I say the city council resolution, they say net zero. So that's not to say that it's easy for PGW to do this, and PGW certainly does not want to do this. It is a municipally owned company, but it acts like a private company a lot of times by doing things like helping senators craft preemption bills behind closed doors and paying gas lobbies with taxpayer dollars. And those lobbies try to keep the country on gas. These things have been reported on a lot in the media. And I can tell you, having gone to many hearings, listening to PGW, they are absolutely not interested in transitioning. But because they are municipally owned, you and me and all of us can join the public hearings to promote the transition away from gas. you can speak to the Gas Commission about how PGW needs to transition. Next slide. Really briefly on our electric utilities. As I said before, 40% of our electricity comes from natural gas. In fact, PECO, which is Philadelphia's energy authority, electric energy, only has 0.5% of renewables in their default service program. That was approved in 2021 for 4 years. So by the time the goal is to one of the goals to cut emissions, they were approved to have 0.5 renewables in their default service. Organizations like Power are pushing back on these even harder to impact institutions, i.e. our privately owned utilities, pushing them to transition by targeting the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. So they're launching a campaign on June 28th in Philly, and targeting the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. Highly recommend following Power, as well as PSRPA. And like I said, if you're interested in more information on utility transitions, we're gonna host No Gas, No Coal and Slingshot in July for a webinar. Next slide. So the call to action is to electrify, solarize, weatherize, and reduce your personal use. Watch for bills that would preempt utility and other transitions, and follow PSRPA and Power, because we put out calls to action when there's an action you can take part in that will have a big impact. Like a call-in day, for example. We put out a call-in day recently in collaboration with another organization. Oh yeah, Tanya, if you could find that, that would be awesome. We put out a call to action recently in collaboration with Chester Residents Concerned for Quality Living, which is a really, really awesome organization, grassroots organization of Chester residents, because their community, it's an environmental justice community that has the childhood asthma rate in Chester is 38%, and nationally it's 8%. In Philadelphia, it's 21%, because they have the Covanta incinerator burns garbage from across the Northeast in that community. So in that community, which is also a predominantly low income and a predominantly Black and Brown community, they want to build a liquefied natural gas terminal, which I'll talk about in a minute. So they put out a call to have their residents call the chair of the task force. Let's go to the next slide. I'll explain that. Follow us and we'll tell you what's going on and how you can help, is basically what we like to say. So what's liquefied natural gas as a final bullet to this presentation? It's made by chilling gas to -259 degrees Fahrenheit in an energy intensive process in order to ship it. Because they're shipping it overseas, these natural gas or LNG terminals are built in coastal areas and often in specifically environmental justice communities. Like in Louisiana, there are several. So right now they want, Penn America Energy wants to build one in Chester. And so a task force was created by pro LNG people, Martina White, the chair, to examine impacts of what this natural gas or this LNG facility might do. But they had a first hearing. I was able to make it halfway through, and the people from that community were barred from entering on the excuse that there was were not enough seats in the room. When I was allowed to enter, I got to the room. It was a locked door. Someone told me, like, opened the door and said, you can't go in because there's not enough seats. And I was like, why can I stand? They said no. And they said other people tried to get in earlier, but there weren't enough seats. So she said, I'll look in and see if there's a seat available. So there was. Someone had left. And so I went in and sat, and I saw 5 people standing And so clearly they had strategically chosen a small room and were also not allowing residents in. So what can you do about that? You can call the chair, Martina White. This is the call that Circle, Chester Residents Concerned for Quality Living, put out. And tell her that you can't discuss this infrastructure going in without inviting residents from that community to be part of the discussion. And yes, I would love to give you all this information. It is, I believe, all available on our website. I'm not sure if that call to action is available under the blog section. She's not chair of the House. She's chair of this liquefied natural gas committee. Yeah, she's a rep. Good question. Okay. Next slide. This is our last slide. We've talked about a lot of difficult stuff today. So thank you so much for being here. I hope that yes, LNG is also their bomb trains. Like it's there. I didn't put in a lot of things about the level of like atomic bombs if you blow up a liquefied natural gas terminal, but it would be devastating. At the hearing, the response that was given was, historically, that's not happened, so we don't need to worry about it. Yeah, so this should be the end. I talked about a lot of things. If you're interested in, I would like to make a presentation about gas powering our electricity, renewable natural gas, and hydrogen. I'm curious about what other people would like to know about, and I'm also available to answer questions. So I just want to say thank you so much for being present for this. And this is some really difficult stuff. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that can be said about liquefied natural gas. I gave a lot of very brief overview information, and there's a lot more in depth that we can go to. So yeah, please put your questions in the chat. Thank you so much, Mitch. I can't believe you're here. You know all this stuff already. But I'm so glad that you are. Oh, great. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Okay. So this is the call to action. If you are listening to Chester residents were not allowed to speak in a public hearing about a liquefied natural gas terminal going in their community, which literally speaking that out loud fills me with anger. You can click on that link and you can get information about how to do that, to call Martina White and tell her that that is infuriating. And the folks at Circle gave us some things that you can say to Martina White, some quotes that you can use, ranging from "this is shameful" to "here's a way that you can do this differently." So yeah. If you have any questions. Oh, great. Yes. Oh, thank you, Mitch. Great. If any Philly residents are present, there are opportunities to testify to the Public Utility Commission. Oh, I called it the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. Now I'm worried I was wrong about that. About PGW's proposed 10% rate increase on May 23rd and 24th. Yes, and Power can suggest talking points. I believe we are putting out a call to action. We are putting out a call to action about that. Follow us and follow Power. I think we echo a lot of their work. So yes, the IRA, great question. The IRA is not, every state has to set up how it's going to manage those funds. And so we don't have answers yet, because the Pennsylvania hasn't come up with how they're going to move that money out yet and how applications are going to work. There's already some write-offs available, but the IRA money is, yeah, we don't have information about that yet. Great question. Let me see if I can find, there's a really great website that provides information on the IRA. Rewiring America is where you want to look on that. Tanya, do you want to answer Richard Cole's question? Does PSR and Chester residents work with Delaware River keepers with LNG?
We do some work with Delaware River keepers. We are doing some work on LNG as well.
Mitch, thank you for this information. Some IRA funds will be distributed through federal tax credits without participation from the states. Others will be managed at the state level. It is, I mean, the great, it is complicated, but the great thing is organizations like Rewiring America are trying to make it really easy. So definitely go to that website because that is their main purpose right now is following IRA information. Yeah, I want to leave it open a little while for questions or happy to, I don't know if anyone wants to comment. If anyone has anything they want to learn more about, then feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. I would love to hear from folks. Tanya, did you want to add anything?
No, I was just going to say thank you for a great presentation. And I'm dropping the link into the chat again if you'd like to sign up to make sure that you get action alerts from us. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Great. So I'm gonna, is PSR working on community solar in PA? Yes, community solar is great. We actually have partnered with an organization that is working on that. Let me get you information for them. Solar United Neighbors is working on community solar across the state. We are not, like, we're supporting other organizations working on that. I am not doing anything directly with that right now. We're supporting, like I said, United Solar Neighbors. One of the things that I am working on is creating a mini documentary about home repairs that are being done in Philadelphia by Philadelphia Energy Authority, which is a governmental organization that is running a pilot project. They're on their second round of upgrading people's homes. Basically, they saw the problem of you would apply for a grant if people who couldn't afford to do things in their homes, like essential repairs, you might apply for something. And because there's another intervening problem, you would get denied for that grant. And also you'd be waiting like 6 months to hear back from it, and then you'd be denied. So the Built to Last program coordinates and funds home repairs for low-income folks in Philadelphia. So I was honored to speak with 5 different seniors who have all had repairs on their homes. And some of them were able to get solar on their homes as a part of that program. And that was with Posigen is the company that puts that leases solar. So that's a great organization, but there's also the folks that I spoke to were all in the Hunting Park community, and there is an organization called Hunting Park Community Solar. Again, this is like a Mitch moment. That is yes, Hunting Park Community Solar, great. That is trying to bring solar into that area. Solar, I keep forgetting names of things. I just said it a minute ago. Solar United Neighbors activates people across the state. My brain is like so full of information. Great. Yes, PSR information. Formaldehyde was found in apartments with gas stoves. Unsafe level. I can't speak to that, but I would be happy to like not talk and for you to speak on that if you'd like to. I want to know where you can use or not use heat pumps. In terms of like region, so it used to be that heat pumps were not as advanced for very, very cold temperatures, but now, oh, I see. Okay, you live in a 150-year-old brick building. Definitely combining heat pumps with weatherization is makes them far more efficient. So Barbara, I would try to find out about how your energy is functioning within your home now. And actually a lot of utilities you can ask them to come out and do like a test to see ways that you can weatherize. So combining heat pumps and weatherization is the most efficient, more efficient than natural gas heating in terms of cost. Yeah, I would check on see if you can find out about the weatherization situation in your home. I mean, certainly you can put a heat pump in anywhere, but you want to maximize the efficiency by making sure that the heat is not escaping out of your home as well. And that would be true no matter what, if you had any kind of heat. So yes, you can certainly put a heat pump into your house. The GOP is pushing rollback parts of it. Oh my gosh. Yes, okay. Thank you, Mitch. Mitch is suggesting that we call the Congress to tell them not to allow the GOP to roll back parts of the IRA. Thank you for that link. That's the Hunting Park Solar. Great. Yes. Thank you, Laura. I would say my apartment is one of those apartments. I am constantly getting more knocks than I should be. The heat pump does not go in the window. It is, there's air source and ground source. A lot of people told me ground source is better. Some people told me air source is better. Lately, I've been like, I think air source is like easier to put in. It's definitely easier to put in because with ground source, you have to drill really far down. Air source, you don't. If you're in a multi-unit building, okay, good to know. But it goes, you'd have a unit outside and then you have like something up on the wall, which is the heat pump. You replaced half your windows. Oh my goodness, great. I'm waiting for my landlord to do that. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate folks who have watched, answered questions, and this is definitely something that we got to do. And it's challenging to confront, but I'm really encouraged when I'm able to speak to people and when I am able to feel like I'm not alone. Oh, Laura, I see a hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah, in order to keep the IRA funding in the budget, we need to get rid of the nuclear weapons, that $2 trillion wasted on that. That's the only way we're going to balance our budget. So get them to support Bill HR 77, the Treaty for Nuclear Disarmament. It's like supporting the Treaty for Nuclear Disarmament made with the United Nations, like signing on to that and all the things that like reducing the nuclear weapons and all that other stuff associated with that.
Love it. Do you know if any
money into the back into the IRA? They're talking about deleting from it because it's a budget problem, because they're also going to have to cut Social Security and they can't do that.
That's really helpful information. Is there any
that bill? I should have the bill number that bill that's no, they're trying to make permitting easier for fossil fuel infrastructure. That bill, what number was it? But yeah, it's right in the House right now or something right now. The Congress or something.
If you know what that is, we would
find it. I had it in my notes a minute ago, but just can't locate it.
Sure. You can definitely email me after the fact.
Stop it. It's Manchin put it out. Senator Manchin put it out again. It just came out last week or 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Actually, my friend Schumer in New York is actually voting for it. And that's bad. But you know, I think the fossil fuel industry intentionally raised the prices of their oil right now to the real cost of oil. They raised it right now to make everyone panic, and then make permitting easier to get what they want. They can. I think these companies are just controlling the market to get what they want, and that's all. And they'll always do that, and they'll always keep us in poverty. So giving them what the corporations what they want is not going to help our economic situation at all. They'll just
That's
do
right.
one or another to get what they want.
Yeah, we can't operate out of fear. We have to focus on the facts, and also reduce our individual use. But if we reduce our individual use and the whole society doesn't change, then it's going to leave us in the same spot. So thank you, Laura. I will try to follow what you're talking about. And if you know of any calls to action, we would love to spread that information as well. So yeah, please email me with more information. That would be really helpful. Okay, thanks so much, all. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, one thing, most Americans are bankrupt. The Amish are who are prospering, and maybe with American lifestyle, the whole thing is not cost effective. Like
Amen.
what it was, the American lifestyle of the past, for everyone driving to work, was not cost effective. And if people become too sick from the fossil fuel pollution, there's a lot of illnesses associated, just aggravating herpes, all those chemicals we're exposed to every day, everywhere in our life that comes out of fossil fuels.
That's right.
But people won't be able to work to earn the income that they need in order to pay for this lifestyle.
That's right. This has been a lot of challenging stuff. I highly recommend that everyone go outside and enjoy this time. You know, it's not perfect, but go enjoy the air that is at least cleaner than China's today. So thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. We'll send a recording to everyone. And I guess good night.